with the start of the college football season well underway, we're in week 3 now. I figured it'd be a good time to go back and look at last season and look at some of the teams that had really strong starts that kind of fizzled away into nothingness that, you know, people may have thought of them highly at the time and their national prominence just went down um, pretty quickly. So I made a TikTok of these teams right after the season ended. Figured it'd be a good time to bring it over to YouTube and see what your guys' thoughts are. So, first up, right here, we have Marshall, the Marshall Thundering Herd, and they went 4-0 at the start of the season. They were, one of the undefeated teams, and then they had a really rough stretch and ended up going 6-7 with a bowl loss. Their last regular season game was the determiner whether they got bowl eligible. When in week 4 they were 4-0, or week 5 or whatever they were 4-0, and we're like almost certain they were going to make a bowl game, to them losing 5 straight to, granted, some pretty tough opponents in NC State, a Power 5 opponent, James Madison and App State, both very very high in the Sun Belt Conference. But the hints were there before. I mean, you can see in their four win stretch at the start of the season, only one game they won by more than one possession, and one of those that they won, by 4 points was their first game of the season to an FCS school. So that's something to look at. Their NC State loss was pretty close. You could argue their James Madison one was pretty close too. But once they lost to South Alabama, getting shut out, there was really no saving them. I mean, they ended up getting a bowl. They ended up getting bowl eligible, but they lost to UTSA in pretty tragic fashion. So, Marshall is, historically not been a great program. They had Randy Moss, but that was pretty much it. That's all they're really remembered for. But anyway, let's get on to Syracuse. Syracuse, again, started off the same way as Marshall, 4-0, with divisive wins over Colgate and Western Michigan. But then they had another stretch of 5 losses. Actually, is it the same? It's this. They went the same. They went the same win-loss schedule. They won 4, lost 5, then win-loss. Same as Marshall, starting with that Clemson loss. To be fair, though, their stretch of games was a lot harder than Marshall's. Losing to, or they had to play Clemson, they had to play a ranked North Carolina team, a top 5 Florida State team, and Virginia Tech and Boston College. I mean, Boston College wasn't that good. But Virginia Tech was definitely like an ACC contender at the time. But by that point, when they faced up against Boston College and lost to them, they were 4-5. Again, their last game of the season was what led them to becoming bowl eligible. When week 5 they were, or week 4, I guess they were, really thinking they were going to get without a doubt bowl eligibility. But with that being said, they did get a bowl game, but lost in awful fashion to South Florida, 45-0. So Syracuse looking better this year. They're already 2-0 with a win against ranked Georgia Tech. So I guess we'll see what happens to them if it ends up the same way. Next, we have Maryland. At one point, they were like number 4 easily in the Big Ten. Started off 5-0, and then they lost 4 in a row to end up 8-5 at the end of the season with a bowl win. But after their loss to Ohio State, they really didn't. Oh, hello, kitty. After their loss to Ohio State, they really didn't recover much. They won against Nebraska and Rutgers. Nebraska pretty close, but Ohio State, Penn State, what turned out to be a pretty good Northwestern team, and for some reason Illinois just that stretch they could not get a win in. They lost semi-close at the Big House to. No, that was at Maryland. They lost closely to Michigan in Maryland. So that's something there. This isn't as bad as the other teams. Just going 5-0 and ending up 8-5 is kind of not the best. Not something that you want your team to do. So that's what happened to Maryland last year. So doesn't look too good for them this year. They don't have the best people on their team anymore. But with that being said, hope they can turn it around. Next, we have probably the worst fall off last year, which was Washington State. They went from going 4-0 in their first 4 games with a ranked win over Oregon State to 5-7. They didn't even get a bowl game after their losses to UCLA, what turned out to be a very good Arizona team, a highly ranked top 10 Oregon team, a very bad Arizona State team, a very bad Stanford team, and a semi-okay kind of mid Cal team. They did get a win late in the season with their win at Colorado, or with their win at Pullman to Colorado, but still not able to get a bowl bid. Pretty sad. They ended the season with a last-second walk-off field goal at Washington, which would have been a crazy win. That probably, I don't remember the rankings for not the Big Ten, the Pac-12, but I think Washington would still have been in the Pac-12 championship, but depending on what happened that game against Oregon, maybe not be in the playoff. So that was probably the worst fall off from last season. I hated seeing it. But, it happens. Very sad, though. Next up, we have Air Force, which was one of the last undefeated teams in the FBS, going 8-0 to start the season, which was very impressive. No one really saw that coming. Just to end their regular season with 4 straight losses to a very bad Army team that they lost very badly to, a bad Hawaii team, and then 2 very good teams in UNLV and Boise State, at least in the Mountain West. So I mean, they clinched their bowl bid very early on, which some of these other schools can't say. But just ending the season off with being the pretty much a Mountain West championship favorite to win the conference, to not even be in the game is not what you want to see your team do. Did win their bowl game against James Madison, which against a very good James Madison team that was also one of the last undefeated teams. Very impressive. But with this kind of rush style offense, it was bound to catch up to them at some point. So there's Air Force. Next one, not as insane of a drop off, but going from a college football playoff contender to not even in a New Year's Six bowl game is the USC Trojans. Now, this year they're starting off pretty good. Last year they started off great. Wins over, at that point still kind of lingering the Colorado hype. They won by 7 at Colorado. The Arizona game, Arizona definitely should have won that, but Caleb Williams pulled it off. in triple overtime and was able to beat the Wildcats and Noah Fafita. But then they went to Notre Dame and lost there. Utah beat them at home. Utah, for some reason, just had a stranglehold over the Trojans. A 1 point win over Cal, and then 3 straight losses to, good teams in Washington, Oregon, and UCLA. But still, when at one point you're ranked or projected to go number 4 in the playoff to losing 3 straight at the end of the season, not a good look. But bowl win against the ACC runner-up Louisville, kind of salvaged the rest of the end of the season. So, again, not as crazy as some of the other ones on this list, but still one that should be looked at and should be, it's definitely a very bad end of the season, going 2 and what is that, 7, 2 wins, 5 losses, 7 whole games. That's what I'm trying to say. Next one up is the Kentucky Wildcats. They started off the season strong with going 5-0 with a win against a ranked Florida team. Can't believe that was last year, ranked Florida. And then they came into Athens and lost to Georgia. They lost at home to Missouri pretty badly. Lost to a ranked Tennessee team, lost to a ranked Alabama team, and then lost to a pretty disgusting South Carolina team to end the season at 7-6 with a bowl loss to Clemson. They did, in this losing streak, they won against Louisville, which Louisville was a fringe college playoff contender if they were able to beat Florida State in the conference championship, but their loss to Kentucky kind of ended that early. Kentucky last year was a very weird team, and just one of those things. They were starting off good. You lose to a very good team, and it kind of just blows up from there. That we've seen with some other teams on this list. Next up, we have Fresno State, which didn't really crumble until late in the season. I said they started off going 8-1. They started off going 5-0 with a loss in the middle of the season, but then they had a little bit of a building back period just to lose the last 3 games of the season, and not even play in the Mountain West Championship. There were some signs early on that the team was not as good as people had thought, with a close win against Purdue, an overtime win against FCS Eastern Washington, but then 3 very good wins where they only were scored on 19 points were scored on them to their over 100. So, good looks there. Then they lost at Wyoming, but then they were able to build that back up with wins against Utah State, UNLV, Boise State. UNLV, Boise State, they were in the conference championship, so they were looking good, and then they just lost to very bad teams in San Jose State, New Mexico State, and San Diego State. So, not a good way to end the season. Bowl win against New Mexico State, though. Not the worst way to end the season, but kind of a up and down season for the Bulldogs. Next up, we have these are the last 2 teams of the video. The 2 Group of 5 Georgia teams. First, we'll talk about Georgia State. Started off 6-1, with their only loss at the start being to Troy. Not really a hard slate that they had starting out, but still wins gathering up nonetheless. Just to end this regular season with 5 straight losses to Georgia Southern, which we'll talk about in just a second, very good teams in James Madison, App State, and LSU, and then to a 1 point loss to Old Dominion, which, you know, Old Dominion's not really a good team, so you shouldn't be losing to them. But a win against Utah State at the end of the season, nonetheless. Another salvaging at the end of the season. That was their only win after their 6-1 start. So that's Georgia State, and last one we have is Georgia Southern. They started off 6-2, and then lost their final 5 games, including a bowl loss to Ohio University. A shutout win over the Citadel, even though they are FCS, shutting out any opponent is a pretty good feat. A very good win against Ball State. Ball State not being a good, a good team, but that's about the same score as the Georgia game was against Ball State. So, early on in the season, people are thinking, hey, their only losses to Wisconsin. Maybe these guys can win the Sun Belt or whatever. Lost to James Madison though. Again, very good James Madison team during the season. A win against a Georgia State team that at that point was 6-1 after the game 6-2. But then just to let it fizzle out, even losing to Marshall, which was on this list earlier, and losing to Old Dominion and App State, and then losing their bowl game. Not good looks. Losing your last 5 is not the best, but these are just some teams that I concocted earlier this year to just see, these teams started out good, didn't end good. If you want to see any more videos like this of me talking about different teams or a similar style to this, let me know in the comments, and please like and subscribe, blah 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 blah. Yeah, thanks for watching.